Donald J. Trump is now President of the United States.
And if I call you a moose, are you suddenly a moose?
So you can stop
I've been feeling nostalgic, so I thought I'd react to some good old anti-SJW content. I thought we'd start with this video from the TRIGGERNOMETRY podcast. This was uploaded all the way in late 2020. Wait, what?
I was indoctrinated, is the way I view it, into social justice ideology. It's basically this sort of mutated form of Marxism that's based around identity and power rather than around wealth and class.
Why do some of these people bring Marxism into it when it's just not related at all? Most social justice causes or like theory or whatever has nothing to do with the working proletariat rising up against their bourgeoisie factory owners, right? Is it just because like it's a scary buzzword or what? If her point is just that, you know, this SJW stuff is also about a struggle for power, then that's literally all of politics. When you get down to it, politics is ultimately about how resources and power is allocated. If that's why she's calling it Marxist, then Donald Trump was a Marxist, Obama was a Marxist, Hitler was a Marxist. Jordan Peterson throws this label around way too carelessly too.
Where are the Marxists here?
And studying racism and sexism and different kinds of bigotry, what happens is that a lot of people who get into it, they sort of start to adopt some of the tenets of the belief system slowly. It's not all at once. One of the things they're very concerned with, for example, they're very concerned with language. And we were talking about Orwell before the show. I mean, you can control people if you can control their thought.
I feel like 90% of the people who cite Orwell have no idea what they're talking about. In fact, I'm sure 90% of them haven't even read the damn book. As I understand it, Orwellian language is making very simplistic ideas the only ones that can be expressed, to remove nuance and complicated abstract thought by forcefully dumbing down the language the citizens have access to. Importantly, Orwellian language is supposed to undermine the meaning of words and downplay the actions of those in power. Kind of like calling Donald Trump's lies alternative facts, or simply saying that the Uyghurs are in education camps. I don't think there's anything remotely similar or to that same extent happening with SJWs in universities. Not everything you disagree with is just Orwellian, and actually using it that way is kind of Orwellian in itself.
If you can control their thought, and you can control their thought if you can control language. And so one of the early things they get you to do is they redefine words like racism and sexism. So they say racism and sexism are prejudice plus power. They say they're doing this so you can talk about structural and institutionalized racism and sexism separately from simple prejudice, what they call simply prejudice. The outcome of doing that is that you now are saying that it's impossible to be racist towards a particular race or sexist towards a particular sex. And
this is just wrong. I know this is an ongoing worry for a lot of people. They did not redefine racism. Okay, the original, colloquial, traditional meaning of racism still exists in every dictionary. In fact, it is often the first thing you'll see. However, an additional definition was added, not in place of, not to replace, not to redefine, but as an additional definition because words can have several meanings depending on context. See, these two definitions can coexist peacefully, unlike some of the races. No, I'm just kidding. When I say work was a bitch or quit being a bitch, he's bitching about you behind your back. It's clear that the female dog part of it is not really relevant in any of those cases, right? The word literally now also means literally the opposite of its original meaning, as in not literally. None of this has to be Orwellian, okay? This is kind of how language adapts and how societies have always functioned. She believes that this definition will mean that you can't be racist to white people, right? But no, of course you can't, because racism isn't just power and prejudice. It is also the belief that one race is inherently superior to another, or a hatred for one race over another, which obviously means anyone can be individually racist to any other person.
I can treat you differently, Francis, as a white man. I can judge you. I can even point to your race and to your sex, and I can use slurs. And I can have this race-based hatred of you, and I can have this sex-based hatred of you, and that's okay because they've said that's not real racism. That's not real.
Who says this? If someone says I hate white people because they are white, that's a racist person. I will say that sometimes racist rhetoric towards white people is too easily excused, like on Twitter, and I don't like that, but I don't think this is a super widespread thing, and I certainly don't think universities try to teach you this. And in fact, there's all sorts of insane people on Twitter. If you want a guaranteed way to lose respect for someone, just scroll through their timeline. Okay, let's talk about why these additional definitions have recently started coming up. That extra definition is also included now to give people more of an understanding of how racism permeates realistically in more subtle subtle but powerful ways in today's world. Listen, I'll give you an example of something, okay? There are social media algorithms that produce racist outcomes. A famous example is with Twitter's cropping algorithm. Let's say you tweet out a photo with a white person and a black person. What's been found is that the algorithm seems to consistently place the white face in its preview while excluding the black face. Now, these small examples on its own in a vacuum may seem relatively harmless, but it is still systemic discrimination based on an inalienable trait, and I don't think it would take much imagination to think of situations where these sorts of applications can have really horrible effects. I don't think you can reasonably deny that this is a racist outcome. But this isn't because individual people are racist. This isn't because the people writing Twitter code are super racist or that the CEO of Twitter is a KKK member, which is kind of what the original colloquially accepted definition implies has to be the case. You can't call this racist unless they have a hatred for another race or believe that they're superior. Situations like this happens because of the historical weight of how power has been allocated through society. That has downstream systemic effects. For example, that might influence the data sets that was fed to these algorithms, or the fact that people in the tech industry tend to be very white and a little Asian, which again might slightly skew the products that they make. And that is in no small part due to America's specific racial policies of the past. That's all the second definition does, allow for these situations to be called racist. Not being able to feels weird, like it would almost undermine the enormity of these issues. You see these kinds of racist outcomes in criminal justice, in education, in healthcare. You have to be able to call these racist because they have clearly specific racialized effects. I think it helps to just think about this in very simple terms. If all black people hated white people, they couldn't really do much about it. They don't have the financial or political capital to subjugate them much.
Wait a minute. I'm white.
Whereas historically, the opposite has actually occurred. So separating individualized feelings of racism from a broader systemic one is important because they have very different effects on the world.
For me, it became a kind of religion. I think it operates that way for a lot of people. So it's a way of feeling like you were doing good in the world. It gives you a moral plan for how to operate in the world. It is, I think for a lot of people, it functions in the place where religion might be. Say the way that it operates in an individual person is that you go into interactions. I used to go into interactions just looking for the sexism and the racism. It's like putting on.
I'm sorry, that sounds like a you problem. Either your teachers were dog shit or you're just dumb and weird. Well-adjusted, critically minded people are able to incorporate new information and apply it appropriately. You're not meant to go from, oh, I just realized systemic issues of racism are things, and then go all the way to, whoa, it's literally everywhere, man. My dog is racist, my dishwasher's racist. Like, sorry, I hope not everyone is as dumb as you. I guess that's the prescription for the day. That's all you can hope for. I mean, with any new piece of information, you can do this too. You can just like take it too far. You just hope people don't. Like, she got into the SJW situation in a really stupid way, and then now she's like gotten skull fucked into the other direction. Like, all right, you know what? It's time. Let's watch some classic videos, okay? Now, here we go. Look at that title. 2017, 2 million views. Oh, this is almost making me nostalgic, guys. Simpler times, eh? Simpler times. Wacky YouTuber interruption here to remind you to like the video, comment some dumb shit, and that I also have a Patreon and a join button if you want to support me. Okay.
According to Pew Research, the net worth of white families in 2013 was $141,000. For black families, it was $11,000, even less than the $19,000 it was in 2007.
Black families got hit very hard by the financial crisis. This is the issue with like systemic things, is that it snowballs, and there's so many factors at play that can compound on top of each other.
The median black family worth is just $1,700, while 40% of black families have zero or negative wealth. White family worth, financial worth, is 69 times more than that of black families. Given this disparity, how can you argue that racism is not a driving factor in income inequality?
Because it has nothing to do with race and everything to do with culture. You have a culture that... Woo! You know what?
Get him, Ben.
You explain to me why black kids aren't graduating high school. Explain that one to me. Explain to me why black kids are shooting each other in rates significantly higher than whites are shooting each other. Explain to me why 13% of the population is responsible for 50% of the murder.
Oh, the 1350.
Why the number of black kids in prison, not for innocent reasons, not for walking down the street and getting pulled into a prison, is so high. If it has nothing to do with culture, explain to me why the single motherhood rate in the black community jumped from 20% to 70% in the same course of time that the civil rights movement has made such tremendous strides. Is America more racist now than it was in 1960? And if it is, please explain to me how that happened.
Okay, so for that question specifically, the actual answer is that people don't have to be individually or culturally more racist for systems to produce more racist outcomes. Now, you can get a lot deeper with that and break things down properly, but that's the basis with which you should answer. There you go, guys. Explain all that. Just go. Explain it. Listen, I can see why he was so good at these, so good at what he did. He got to slam all those facts in there, right? And he knows that not many people are super equipped or like, are ready to answer even one of those adequately. And there's just so much there. You get overwhelmed. You're like, well, explain why, I don't know, bigotry. You just come off looking like a moron. Really, each one of his claims ultimately has one narrative thread, and what you should do is attack the narrative as a whole. I think the main way you fight this is just ask, why do they have a different culture? Why do they have a worse culture? And they'll give you loads of explanations like, oh, the father leaves and this and that and prison and gang. And the hippity hoppity. But you'll say, yeah, but why? What originated that? I mean, whites and blacks have lived in the same country for centuries. Why did one of these groups deviate so far from the other? Eventually, you keep digging, the person will either have to bite the bullet that racism had some effect, or you'll get to the yikesy answer, which Ben will never say, and I don't even think he believes, which would be to imply that it's some genetic thing, right? Also, he's asking, like, why do black kids shoot each other up so much, right? He's essentially asking, like, why do these violent gangs exist? And listen, I think quite simply, most people should be able to agree with this, that I don't think people primarily join gangs and risk their lives just because it's cool to do so and because rap music glamorizes it. You genuinely think that if one of these, like, entry-level gang members, that if they could just walk down the street or take a quick car ride to like a nice bank, apply for a job, get a nice cushy job there, 9 to 5, decent pay, if that was like a genuine opportunity that they felt like they had in their lives, you think all these people would just forego that to get into shootouts? My point is that in the end, this probably has something to do with lower opportunities, but it all has roots in policy and practice that was racist. A lot of us know the classics by now, I think, right? Redlining, disproportionate sentencing, fewer job callbacks despite same qualifications, yada yada yada. And this isn't just a narrative that's stitched together by a couple of loose statistics here and there and that's sold to the public. You know, something that sounds nice when it's all laid out in a neat little box that you've constructed. You know, this is based on looking at actual historical policy and the clear, measurable impacts that they had. Man, you know, arguing back at some of these kinds of videos doesn't have the same oomph that it used to. Looking back on videos like these, a few things come to mind. Firstly, it's pretty incredible how far and how quickly things have changed. Just even like general apolitical gaming spaces and like the YouTube commentary scene. Hell, even the front page of YouTube used to have fairly conservative undertones, or at the very least anti-progressive undertones. And that's, broadly speaking, just not the case anymore. Even though that kind of content still remains popular, I think it's now popular among different people, and there's a bit more balance to it, you know? It's not like the site is just inundated with this stuff like it used to be. Secondly, I think this was an important phase in online discourse. People like Jordan Peterson, you know, like him or hate him, he was an articulate conduit through which people could express genuine concern. Whereas, you know, for too long, that was being swept under the rug where it would fester rather than go away. In some cases, I think shining a light on that so we can really go through those conversations is important. Thirdly, I think it's a really good reminder to critically examine popular waves. Try not to join in too much with circle jerks. They will all have some nuggets of truth to them. But usually those nuggets are stuffed within this ball of mostly garbage drivel. You know, I sometimes wonder if, you know, people didn't listen to commentators and pundits for hours every week, and instead just like read reporting from a reputable newspaper for like 5 minutes a day. I think we'd all actually be much more informed, and certainly much less misinformed. I don't know, these are the things that these videos brought to my mind. Anyway, till next time, peace.